Alright, so last time that I did a level design study, I looked at the first episode of Doom. I thought about doing a similar playthrough of episode 2 of Doom, but the problem is there's just so much weird about the second episode of Doom. There's so many interesting ideas in it that it would take a really long time, and I don't think any of you want to watch a 3-hour video of me talking my way through the second episode. So what I've done instead is we're in E2M6, Halls of the Damned, and to me this is like one of the high points of the episode, so I'm just going to try and play through this. I've already done a previous attempt at recording this, and it turned into almost a full hour recording, so I'm going to try and make it a little more economical this time. We'll see how that works out. Other thing I want to talk about just briefly before we get into this is that when I'm running through these maps and doing these level studies, my goal is that I'm trying to see like cool, exciting stuff that's like, ooh, I like that. How does that work? What can we call that? What name is that? I'm not, I think it's really easy if I see something, it's like, I'm not sure what that is. It's really easy to just attach an existing theory or an existing framework to it and say, oh, it's just one of those, right? Be kind of dismissive and not actually see what's going on and what's cool about it. And I think like I did that a little bit last time when I was going through episode 1, where I talked about like, oh, it's a horseshoe shape. It's just kind of dismissive, like, oh, it's just one of those. And I didn't really spend a lot of time on it. The goal for me is I want to learn, right? And hopefully you all are coming along on the journey of me trying to figure these things out for myself. And it's not me saying like, oh, it's this, it's that. Like it's, if I say like, oh, I think it's one of these, I might be wrong. There might be something more complicated or more interesting going on under the surface that I just don't have the toolkit to recognize yet, right? So I'm not going to be able to comment on everything. I'm going to miss some things. Yeah, that's part of the journey. So I think that's probably enough of a preamble for trying to make this shorter than my previous attempt recording this. So let's go ahead and jump in. Also, I am doing pistol start. Normally you'd have your weapons from the previous levels, but we're doing pistol start and ultra violence. So I'll probably die a couple times here. Especially if I blow myself up with a rocket launcher. Alright, so two really interesting things here. First is that the first encounter we have a shotgunner and 2 imps, which already in a very simple space is kind of a very spicy combination of enemies. Like, how do I prioritize close combat with imps? Fireballs, they're hard to dodge. But the shotgunner has this extra priority as a hit scanner, so what do? I think like the boring conservative thing is like wait for them to come around the corner one by one, and I could do that. There's nothing to really stop me from doing that. But if I actually go into the combat space and engage them, 3 enemies, and this is a very spicy little encounter. The other thing is that then we get the Pinky and the Cacodemon, which both have these very, very large health pools. They're these kind of meat wall enemies, where if I want to get to what's on the other side of them, I have to basically defeat them. And I also have this rocket launcher in the corner that if I pick it up, I might accidentally get into some trouble. Like I did when I swapped to it and I shot the imp and the blast radius affected me. But it's also a really useful tool. If I can get enough distance from them, then I can use that rocket launcher to do a significant chunk to the Pinky and the Cacodemon. Other thing here is that this door is flagged so that monsters can open it. So if the imp, or I guess the shotgunner, backed into it, they could open this door and cause the Cacodemon and the Pinky to enter the arena earlier. But what's also going on here is that even if I manage to pull the Cacodemon and the Pinky into that tight combat space and just dance around them and avoid them, all that's on the other side of this door is a button. And when I interact with that, I hear another door open elsewhere. I'm not sure where exactly. And if the Pinky and Cacodemon were still alive, I'd have to face them now as well. And if I was still trying to avoid them, then that'd be an extra dance I have to do. So very simple set of rooms, but already like a lot going on. And like the first set of 3 enemies versus the second set of 2 enemies, very different kind of fight. And already we've got these very different flavors that combine. But cool, we heard a door open, we backtrack to here, and we see they've got access to this new space, which is dark and scary. We can see some blood around the corner. And if we continue down the hallway, we see this space, which I think is really interesting. This totally looks like a combat space, right? Like I'm totally expecting if I push across that slime, there are some corners where there are going to be some shotgunners waiting for me. Maybe there are some shotgunners waiting just behind those pillars, and this could turn into a real shooting gallery if I'm not careful. I think part of what's going on with the slime there is similar to E1M6. There's like a slime river at the start where I'm encouraged to cross it, and once I cross, if I backpedal, I have to backpedal all the way across, right? Otherwise, if I get stuck in the slime, that's extra damage I'm taking as kind of an unforced error. So it's kind of a way of making this commitment, making me commit in a more hard way to it. I can't slowly peek around this corner, right? Because I'm going to be standing in slime. But what I can do is I can explore around this wall, see on the other side, we've got dead Doom Marine, and see it from another angle. And now we can see like, okay, so there aren't shotgunners around those pillars. I'm not seeing any actual corners where anybody's hiding. So maybe it's okay. We peek out, and there's nobody here. And to me, this is kind of a joke. It's funny. Like, I so strongly expect there to be a combat encounter in this kind of space, and now I've got a button. It's like, oh, okay, here's where the combat encounter is going to come. No. Okay, all it did was raise a platform so I can get the power up. And like this is another kind of hard commitment. It's a long hallway down this path. It's like, okay, as soon as I go down here, they're gonna like teleport in a Baron of Hell or something, and I'm gonna have this close combat fight, and there's gonna be enemies all over the place. But nope, nothing. It drops the floor out, so now this whole area is slime. But it's not a combat space. So the interesting thing here is that we now have a side route, and it's damage that's kind of unavoidable if we go along this route. We're going to take damage from the slime. But we have these islands of health along the way, which means that we can make it across, but there's not actually that much damage taken. This is a kind of thing where if you did this at the end of the level, and the player had unavoidable damage, that could be really mean because you don't know how much health the player is going to have. But in this case, because it's towards the start of the level, I think it's okay. You know, I may have come out of that fight with Cacodemon and the Pinky really hurt, in which case this would kill me because it's unavoidable damage. But even if I did die, like, you know, it's just a couple minutes at most of playtime off the replay. It's not a big deal. But again, like if you did this at the end of a level, that could be really frustrating. So here we have a clear goal. We've got a blue key door, and that's, if you know from the other levels, that's the texture that's used for the exit door. So I know like my exit is on the other side of this blue key. All I need is a blue key. But before I move on, just briefly, like why I find this so funny is that I'm imagining like if I built this level out and I built this intricate combat space, like this space would play really well with a couple enemies in it. You could do a lot with this combat space, right? But then having the restraint to say like, I'm going to make the player think it's a combat space and then keep it quiet. No enemies at all, right? That's hilarious, right? Like that's it's like Jaws, he's gone under the boat. You don't even see the shark, right? You've got all this anticipation building up from this kind of thing. I think there's probably a better way of building up this anticipation. like this joke might fall flat. It might just be like, huh, I don't get it. Huh, what's the point of the button and the thing and the so on? But like if you're anticipating an ambush, which I think the other levels in this episode have already set you up to anticipate ambushes all over the place, then I think this joke lands. God, I love that berserk ability. Yeah, so a really basic little ambush there. We've already got our blue key, so now we can go back and exit the level, right? One thing that's interesting is that the ambush opens in such a way that we can kind of divide and conquer. We've got the first group here that we have to deal with, right? There's no avoiding these guys. But then the second group here is tucked around this corner, so they'll kind of bounce their way out of that with the way that the AI's path. Like, they don't do actual pathfinding, it's more like they try and move towards the player. And they'll bounce around in here until I peek around this corner, which means that it's kind of a two-phase ambush. I think it's very simple, but it helps keep them from overwhelming in a way that's frustrating. And that's a pattern we're going to see throughout this level, where it's kind of a tool for, I think, drip feeding the enemies. We'll see more of that later. But cool, we open up the blue door and we see, wait a second, there's another exit door? This isn't the exit, and we need a red key? Okay. So already this is kind of defying the conventions that have been established in the whole first episode and the 5 levels of this episode so far, where, like, this is supposed to be an exit. So something weird's going on. Okay, so now we've got this area here, which is spooky, spooky dark. Flickering lights and very weird shapes, very kind of labyrinthine. So I'm gonna avoid that and go down this way. Yeah, so these hallway fights don't do a whole lot for me. For me, these are just a bit boring. I open the door and I shoot, and that's kind of it. If I played it with the berserk power up, then it's a little more aggressive, but it's still like I just do flat damage. There's no target prioritization here. There's no interesting footwork really. It's just open the door, shoot. Now, what is more interesting is that second ambush with pinkies here. Where, depending on how I time that, like, these guys aren't going to detect me because they're going to ambush. They're going to detect me until I'm pushed up about here. So I've already probably cleared out the rest of these guys, right? And depending on the timing, I might have this door closed behind me, in which case I've got this really tight fight against the pinkies to try and deal with them before they close in. And one thing here that, one of the skills of fighting the pinkies is if you bait them, if you get close enough that they try and do a melee attack, they stop moving during the animation of their melee attack. So you can step forward, bait their melee attack, step back, and you've bought yourself more time than if you just backpedal all the way into the wall. Like, if I just ran away and then he does melee attack here, I'm going to take that damage. So even with a really simple space like this, it can encourage, depending if that door is open or not, depending on the timing of it, it can encourage a very precise kind of fight with the pinkies. Okay, here's a bit of fun where we've got this like anti-personnel, don't go back here sign, and a button, which we can use to open that. But first we need to go through the other hallway here. And it's always fun to sneak up behind enemies and feel like you've got the advantage on them. Yeah, so it seems like we had a couple enemies come out of the labyrinth, kind of Work. Oh, maybe. Got a couple more. It looks like we've got some like double stacked. I'm not sure what's up with that. Okay. But yeah, in a way, the monster placement sensibility in this level is similar to the E1M7 ecosystem mindset, where it's like more and more monsters that get spawned in or revealed and are allowed to trickle out into the level in unpredictable ways. I've played this level several times now as part of trying to record it and also just part of trying to understand it. And it always plays a bit differently because of the way that the monsters are allowed to trickle out into the level. One thing that just struck me a bit is like there's like the concrete military base stuff going on in this section, and then there's this kind of brown wooden metal of this kind of hell theme, and it's almost like there's this scar cut into the level, and it's like a hole to another dimension, right? And the monsters are spilling out of that into the military base. Yeah, Doom doesn't do a whole lot with its thematics, but sometimes it's able to achieve some kind of nightmare logic of this dialogue between hell themes and tech-based themes. All right, so now this next section's got some tricks and traps to it, so I'm gonna go ahead and save. All right. All right, so when I refer to this as a tricky trappy situation, I do mean like actually tricks and traps, like I forget if it's map 07 or map 08 in Doom 2, but it's a Sandy Petersen map where you spawn into this octagon where you have 8 different doors around you, and you can open those different doors in different sequences, and they each lead you to an encounter room that plays with kind of the edge cases of the systems. It's also, I believe, the first time you encounter a pain elemental. It's one of my favorite levels because it's just very playful and very, very silly and clever. And this, to me, feels kind of like a proto tricks and traps, like an early sketch of trying to explore those ideas. Because like I've got all these choices here. I mean, I guess at this point I've got north, south, east, and west since I came in on that 45. And I don't know where any of these are going to go. And also in terms of my larger term goal, like I need to find a red key, right? And that can be anywhere. One thing though is that when I came in through this 45, the Cacodemon was on my left. I'm not sure if the Cacodemon is patrolling or what exactly. Maybe it's already alerted to my presence. But one use of enemies sometimes is to like draw the player's attention. So like maybe it intends for me to be looking over this way. So let's go ahead and try this door first. Yeah, so now that I've stepped into the room, the door closes behind me, and I've got this crusher here that I need to worry about. If I step a little bit further forward, I'm going to get a whole bunch of monsters. I do have the chain gun there to entice me. Since I had a pistol start, that chain gun is really important. But you know, if I'd gone through the previous levels and didn't do a pistol start, the chain gun's not as exciting, but it's still something. All right, so it's a whole bunch of lost souls on the left and the right, and also some pinkies, and some imps directly up front. The imps are pretty squishy, so you can chew through them pretty fast. And the way I tend to play this fight is like I can't backpedal because of the crusher. And you know, if I just ran straight in here and I didn't realize the crusher had activated yet, I might aggro these guys and then step back and get caught in the crusher, and that'd be kind of mean. I think like a way of improving the space would be to give a little bit more buffer so the player can learn about the crusher and learn that they're trapped in here before encountering the enemies, maybe. Or at least make sure that if they do backpedal, they've got a little bit more space to work with, in which they can hopefully realize there's a crusher. Because like just stepping back and being instantly crushed feels pretty bad. But yeah, it's really easy to get surrounded, right? Like I've got these high pressure melee units on left and right that can close in, and I can't move if I'm not careful. And I've got a bunch of imps, so what I did in this case, carve out some space and then put my back against a corner where I can minimize the number of enemies that can attack me. Now it's all melee enemies, so if I want to, I could even switch to a chainsaw and just deal with them one at a time, and I'd be safe. What I've done other times though is like go out and carve my space into this corner over here, and then similarly fight from the corner. So it's very different. Like normally you want to keep your mobility in Doom, but this is a case where because they're all melee units and because I want them to come in single file and not be surrounded by them, corners are actually safer. Other thing I like here is that I can't go to the exit. Like if I go for that door, I can't interact with it. Interacting won't open it. What I need to do is press the button here to disarm the trap that I've sprung to be able to get out. And I think that's a good way to guarantee that the player's actually completed the encounter, because you know, if I'm at this position, all those lost souls and pinkies, it's going to be really hard for me to just run out of here. The other thing though is that this room is just kind of optional. Now that I know that this room doesn't have the key I'm looking for, in the future I could just avoid this room. Which I guess is kind of unfortunate, but I mean I think it works. Or specifically like the new player experience, the player won't know. They just have to go explore. Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the north door. So this is a case where if I was playing more conservatively, I could have fought those guys from the doors, like chipped away at them. But the main ambush here is going to happen once I run across all these goodies on display here. Yeah, so in this case, there's nothing to stop me from just backing out of the room, but I think the like all those goodies out there are really tempting, right? So it's kind of like, you know, we've got a crusher as one way of locking a player into a room. We've got goodies as a way of drawing the player into a room. We're going to see next is another variation. Ooh, actually this one is not the one I was thinking of. We're going to come back here in a minute because we don't have the gold key yet. Okay, so this one starts out as a door fight. Like those first few enemies aren't all that interesting. It's basically a two-dimensional, it's a shooting gallery, right? Like target priority doesn't matter as much, my footwork doesn't matter as much, I can just shoot them, right? But what is cool here is that I can open the door from the one side, but on the other side, it requires the yellow key. So now I'm stuck in here until I find the yellow key. And I think the way this room is structured is just really, it's very simple, but it's really good. Yeah, so what we've got here is a really basic kind of U shape where if I, like most of the enemies are inside of the U shape, and as they're alerted, they're trying to path towards me. So they're just staying stuck in the U shape. And that means that, sure, I had this door fight against these guys, and that wasn't that exciting. But now if I want to deal with these other enemies I hear, I've got to push all the way around this corner to start engaging them. And because there's some randomness, they might bounce their way out. That might surprise me. But also means like if I do draw out one of these pinkies, I can then loop all the way around. I've got all this space to work with. And I can loop around and deal with the other one and kind of divide and conquer the fight. So I think this kind of setup is a great way of giving the players space to work with. And yeah, I just think like this is really neat for such a simple bit of geo. Like it just works really well. Other thing here that's really interesting, I think, is that kind of a characteristic of Sandy's levels is that he loves to give the players tons of power-ups. So we've got partial invisibility, which I think makes the enemies less likely to hit their ranged attacks. We've got night vision goggles, and like the other room we had, I'm forgetting what all else, but like it's just goodies everywhere. I think it's nice. Like it's since Sandy is a bit more mean with his encounter designs, he's more likely to spring an ambush on you. Like here we go. I think giving the players more power-ups is a way of kind of counterbalancing. It's like, sure, you're going to be ambushed more often, but you also have a bigger toolkit. You have more tools that you can use more economically. It also means that what I mean by using these tools economically is like I could choose to reserve this. I don't have to pick it up now, right? Like I could come back and pick this up later and use it in a different case where I need it more. So if I'm struggling on one particular encounter, I've got this whole like reserve of tools that I can apply to it. Okay, but now I have the gold key card, so I can go for this gold door that I saw. So now what's fun here is that, again, this is totally normal exit messaging. And this means several different possibilities. One is if I've forgotten about the other door at the start, I might think this is actually the exit, and I've done what I need to do, and now I can reach the exit. If I do remember the door at the start, though, then I might think this is a secret level exit. Like, ooh, this will take me to Ziggurat Vertigo. But it's peculiar. It could also mean like the one that we saw earlier is a trap. It could mean that this one is a trap. All right, so I kind of spoiled it in the way that I presented it, but imagine like you've just struggled through those last 3 encounter rooms, which are already like these aggressive ambushes and traps and doors locking behind you and crushers. And you see this exit and you're thinking, thank God, I can finally reach the exit where we can move on to the next level. And you press it and the door, the floor drops out from under you, and you have this brilliant contrast of this blue space into this red space against cacodemons, which are also red, and shotgunners, which are also red. And it's such a good joke because you have the whole first episode. This is the exit pattern. This is how exits normally look. And it's also been the case of like the previous 5 levels in this. This is how exits look. But this isn't an exit. So it's like an episode and a half of setting expectations to then subvert them in this really aggressive encounter. And like even if this wasn't a fake exit, this would be a really solid like floor falls under you, falls out from under you kind of ambush, because the cacodemons are really tanky and the shotgunners are really threatening. So how exactly do you deal with this collection of enemies? There's a real danger here of getting boxed in, especially because of like the pillars and the spears with the heads on them. Like these have collision. But there's also a soul sphere over here, which gives a really good chunk of health. So what I try and do, and I didn't play it very well this time, but what I try and do is play a little bit on this side, play a bit on this side, and try and keep control of space so that I can get access to the resources and chip away at the enemies in the meanwhile. And then once the shotgunners are down, then the cacodemons are a little bit easier to deal with. But yeah, like this is a really solid encounter room, even if it wasn't this kind of hilarious fake exit. All right, so here we have a map. The way I think of this is that Sandy's just played a kind of mean joke on us. It's kind of a joke at the player's expense, and now like he's giving us a reward for it. The key we're looking for wasn't over there. The exit we're looking for isn't over there. But don't worry, we got a map now, and now we've got a tool. So like, if we fall for future traps, it's kind of our fault because we've got the auto map has been filled out now. It's not visible from where I'm at on the map, but you'll see it later. You could imagine like there are other power-ups that you could give. That would be a similar kind of like, hey, you survived my tricky trap, and here's a reward for you. You could in fact even, it wouldn't work with being like a fake exit, but like if this was great and you could see inside, ooh, there's a power-up I really want, then you could do that as a way of teasing the player into a trap. But yeah, I just really like that space as, to me, it's like a prototype for tricks and traps in Doom 2. They're both very similar in their structure, and to me it feels like just classic Sandy Petersen level design. Okay, so this next section, we're going through the dark maze. And to do that, like I could go through here as I am, and it'd be really hard, right? Because it's dark and fighting against enemies that are hard to see. There's some specterized pinkies deeper within this maze. It's going to be hard. But now I've got the auto map, which helps. Or rather, I've got like the filled out auto map. So I can navigate the maze with a little bit better sense of direction. I'm going to get less stuck, right? But this is where the night vision power-up comes in. So one thing, like I mentioned at the start, that this is a Tom Hall level that became a Sandy Petersen level. And this kind of space I'm in right now feels just like classic Tom Hall from my understanding at least. Like what I've read is that Tom Hall cared a whole lot about the story and wanted to create strong themes and identities to the spaces rather than doing very abstract level design that Doom ended up as. And something like this, you can see like this is human scale. There are these little trims with like computer bits inset. It's like this attention to detail at a very granular level. And like especially compared to the space that we were just in, which was very abstract, very, certainly no like inset trims and detailing like this. It's like here's Tom Hall's vision of what Doom could have been. And the other thing that we just played is Sandy's vision of what Doom is. And it's just so cool that we get to see these two different languages side by side in the same map. I have no idea what like the actual process was for Sandy to try and adapt Tom's scraps into the finished levels that I end up getting to play. But it's just like such an interesting little quirk of this whole episode, because most of the levels started out as Tom Hall levels that Sandy took over. I think there are a couple levels in this episode that are like 100% Sandy levels, but I think most of them are like this, where it's this interesting kind of dialogue between multiple authors. Hey, so a quick correction. According to the Doom Wiki, this level is credited entirely to Sandy Petersen. I do still feel that a lot of the tech-based elements have that Tom Hall feel from the other collaborations between Tom Hall and Sandy Petersen, but according to the wiki, this is entirely Sandy's. Cool. Night vision goggles. That's... Yeah, so you can see, like, the unfortunate thing about the night vision goggles is that it kind of flattens everything. So we went from, like, this really moody lighting to just, like, flat and kind of boring. But it does make it a whole lot easier to move through the space. It makes it easier to navigate. It means I'm less likely to get stuck in the maze. So it's kind of a soft lock and key, I think, of what's going on here. Oh, I was gonna try and... I think I'm like one punch away. Oh no! Okay, so I've got a chunk to replay here. I'll try and get through it quickly though. Okay, so let's see. North is the fake exit. Cool, so I don't actually need to do any of those other rooms in that space. It does mean I'm missing out on a few upgrades, like I don't have the chain gun yet, which would be really nice to have. Let's go ahead and save. Yeah, so you can imagine how difficult that pinky fight would be if it was pitch black in here. Oh, I feel like I'm cheesing this guy a little bit. Okay, so I think a couple things to talk about here before I move on. One is that there are all these little hook shapes, like this, and like even the one in the first room that we entered. And I think part of what's going on with that is it helps it kind of meters the pace, if that makes sense. it's like if this was one big flat arena, it'd be like a slaughter map with all these enemies in it, right? Like they'll all just beeline towards me, and it'd be really easy to get infighting to trigger. It'd be really easy to use AoE against them. It wouldn't be very interesting, and like it'd be over very fast. I think one thing is like the difficulty of Doom's encounters isn't proportional to the number of enemies in the arena. After a certain threshold, it becomes very chaotic, sure, but that chaos means infighting and AoE and stuff like that, where it's actually kind of easier to have a lot of enemies than to have very thoughtfully placed small groups of enemies. And I think with these hook shapes, it means that I need to keep pushing into the space, even if the enemy's alerted. I need to push into the space to actually get the enemy to come out and attack me. So I'm not going to end up facing the entire space worth of enemies all at once, which is a good thing. Because otherwise, like, I just clear out that first room, wipe out all the enemies, and now I walk to the end, get the thing, and go back. Like, that'd be boring. It'd be really fast. There wouldn't be any shape to it, right? Like, I want the encounter to have like a like rising act, climax, falling act kind of curve to it, where there's like anticipation and tension and like, can I actually win this fight? And then resolution of like, yes, I won, I managed to get away, however I end up resolving it. And if it's all the enemies at once, it's like, okay, well, I've got a good handle on this, I'm just going to chip away until they're all gone. And then like the final acts of cleaning it up is just, it's kind of like jumping straight into the act of cleaning up. So I think like this kind of labyrinth structure which shows up throughout Doom is just it's got a couple of these different patterns to it that I think are really good at pacing things. And again, like part of this is that kind of soft key of strongly encouraging the night vision goggles. If this was just a big box, then it wouldn't be that hard to navigate, especially if I didn't have like the auto map. Which I guess this time I don't, because I didn't pick it up again. Other thing that I think is going on here, though, is enemies are still able to kind of bounce their way out of these corners if they're alerted, which means that there's this element of unpredictability. It feels a lot like E2M6, where it's that kind of ecosystem mindset to enemy placement, where each time I play this is going to be different. Last thing I want to talk about, though, is this ambush here with all of the lost souls. Whoa! There we go. To me, like, this kind of ambush isn't all that exciting. Like, there's no target priority. It's very similar to like that hallway fight where it's all just like a linear line of enemies. A linear line. Like, it's basically just a question, can I crowd control? And since we picked up the plasma rifle around that corner, crowd controlling these guys isn't hard at all. And even though we burn all of our plasma ammo, the reward for defeating these guys is more plasma ammo. So it's, I guess, like a different flavor of ambush, which is interesting. If it was the same kind of ambush over and over, that'd be boring. It'd be predictable. So it is unexpected, but it's not. It feels just too easy, I guess, in a way. I don't have to adapt very much. I come across a solution right away, and I can just implement that solution, and then it's done, right? I want a little bit more back and forth, where I have to think on my feet some more, I think like having a more mixed composition of enemies in there might help with that. Having that ambush play out differently, where they aren't like trapped in this closet, might also help with that. But I do think like it helps with the pacing, where like if this didn't exist, if there wasn't this ambush here, then I'd probably be able to duck into that back corner, get the plasma rifle, and come out too easily, and I'd probably have too much ammo. Right, so like it's a way of making me burn a whole bunch of plasma ammo. Yeah, I guess after finishing off the Baron here, I'm out of plasma. Yeah, well, I'm having no luck with those melee hits. Okay. I think you can see, though, like, the challenge that comes with the darkness. Oh, geez. Didn't even see that guy. Okay, so I should be able to play through that bit faster. So I do think like that fight does become more interesting if I haven't dealt with these other enemies like I did this time. Because then they combine, it becomes kind of like an out of the frying pan into the fire situation where it combines with other enemies in a more interesting way than if I've cleaned everything up and it's just new enemies in isolation. Alright, so we finally got the... Finally got the red key here. So you can see what, like, what a scary maze this is, right? But thankfully, next to the red key, we've got a little bit more night vision to work with, so we can try and work our way back out of this mess. It's a little bit unfortunate that the barons get stuck on this door, but also, like, imagine how chaotic it would be if they could just easily get back here. Like, I've already been struggling enough as it is. Alright, so we finally got all the keys. One thing that I haven't talked about is that there is a button here that I have no idea what it does. I haven't been able to figure this out. I'm sure I could look it up somewhere, but I do feel like, yes, there's a chainsaw for us that we probably should have picked up earlier. But one thing that I do think, a lot of the episode 2 maps are these kind of key hunt maps where you see the door early on and you just need to explore to find the key. I think one of the problems that shows up in Sandy's levels is kind of button hunts, where you press a button and you have no idea what it did. Like, I have no idea what this button did, and if this button was critical path, that could be really frustrating. I think, like, part of it is that the keys have a really strong visual language where it's easy to see, here's the locked door, here's the key, I can put one and one together and figure out like, I know what these things do. But if I push this button and then I go back to an area I've been to before and there's now a new opening, was it because of the button? Was it because of something else? Was it because I killed a monster? Was it because I crossed a line def somewhere? I mean, it could be a lot of different things, and it's hard to, unless I can see the door opening in reaction to me pressing the button, or I can hear something changing, reacting to me pressing the button. A button where I just press it and I have no idea what happened it's really hard to work with, I think. It's like here, I have no idea what this did. All right, but at this point, we have unlocked the actual exit, and we can call it.